Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, August 27th, 2022, and today we're going to be talking about the abortion referendum in the state of Michigan. Now, I made a video about a week ago talking about how the Democratic Party should utilize these abortion referendums to their advantage, and it is entirely true. What we have seen in data released from the state of Michigan is that the issue of abortion now ranks as the #1 issue for voters across the state, and also is driving voters in the direction of the Democratic Party. Now, this is a poll that was released just yesterday morning at 6 a.m. It found that in the state of Michigan, we found Gretchen Whitmer with a margin of victory over Tudor Dixon by about 11 points. Now, personally, I do not expect Gretchen Whitmer to win by 11 points. I think that's partially unrealistic, just largely in part due to the fact that Michigan is a swing state, went to President Biden by just 2.8%, went for President Trump back in 2016. So it does tend to go back and forth, even though it was long a Democratic state on the presidential level. We've seen Republican and Democratic governors up throughout the past couple of decades, but looking at the results now, Gretchen Whitmer is actually defying wide expectations, and there's one thing that is really driving the voters in her direction, and again, it is the issue of abortion. Now, we're going to go through these results, but before we do that, we are going to talk about how pretty much this has been a foundational part of how Democrats are likely going to try to shift the midterm elections in their favor. Following the Kansas abortion referendum failing by a margin of 18 points in a Trump plus 15 state, it proved to voters across the country, Democrats, Republicans, independents, political analysts, newscasters, whatever it might be, that the issue of abortion was very much one-sided, and it wasn't one-sided in favor of the Republican Party whatsoever. The overturning of Roe v. Wade has inspired copycat referendums like the one you've seen in the state of Kansas, but Republicans aren't super confident about them. If they can't win in a Trump plus 15 state, what does that mean for their ability to win in the state of Michigan? Chances are they don't. And the reason why that's so impactful is because Michigan has coinciding, regularly scheduled election results this November. Had the Kansas abortion referendum been held in November, we would not have gotten this early indicator that Democrats could use this to their advantage in an extent that had never been seen before, but it would also maybe have a flip side where it benefits the Democrats, maybe in Kansas's 3rd congressional district or in the governor's election that is likely going to be very competitive. But the point is that the voters in Kansas made it clear how they believe and how they stand on the issue of abortion. And if Republicans, again, to reiterate, cannot win a Trump plus 15 state on this issue, where can they win, especially when it gets down to swing states? Michigan also is a state that typically goes in the direction of the national party in terms of general direction during midterm years. What I mean by that is essentially if there's a Democratic president, Michigan likely goes red, but if there's a Republican president, Michigan likely goes blue. And you can see that to be true in every election leading up to one till now. In 1994, under Bill Clinton, Michigan went to the GOP by 23 points. 98, it went to the GOP by 24 points. In 2002, the Democrats won it by 4 points under President George W. Bush. In 2006, they won it by 14. They lose it again in 2010 by a margin of 18. They lose it in 2014 as well. And then 2018 rolls around, and the Democrats win Michigan. So in every single midterm election for the past 3 decades, we have seen Michigan vote in the opposite direction from where the President of the United States is. And history would tell us that that pattern should repeat. But history also was taken in, all these elections over the past 30 years, was when abortion was legal across the entire country, with no exceptions. Now that's different. So Michigan is in a point where they have a referendum on the ballot questioning whether or not abortion should be legalized within the state. It's a bit different than the one in Kansas. A vote yes would actually be the pro-choice vote, and a vote no would be the pro-life vote. It's different because those who are initiating this referendum actually are seeking to overturn the constitutional provision that says that abortion must be illegal within the state of Michigan. Altogether, though, what we see is that it is a bump for the Democratic Party, and we'll get into that data in just a moment. But like I said, there are copycat referendums popping up across the nation, not only for this year, but for future years. Republicans, quite simply, haven't learned their lesson because most of these abortion referendums that are popping up on the ballot are not initiated by and for Democrats, but rather by and for Republicans. But they aren't going to pass. They might pass in states such as Kentucky, which are about 15 points more to the right of Kansas, meaning you're talking a Trump plus 30 state. But when it comes down to California, Kansas already failed, Vermont, these are states where Biden already won or have already proven to vote down such an initiative. Montana is a bit iffy. It's a Trump plus 15 state as well, but it might actually vote against the issue of a pro-life agenda. And the reason why, well, we've seen data within the state of Montana that shows that it's vehemently pro-choice, so it could be quite fascinating to see the results there. But our focus here is on Michigan, and we'll talk about why this focus has really changed the trajectory of the race. We already know that over 30 years of history, we have seen Michigan vote against the incumbent party. Yet today, based off the political betting markets, based off the 538 forecast, the Democrats have about a 90% chance of victory, and the polling data shows the Democrat up by about 7 points statewide. Super significant, knowing that the history has defied this has defied historical expectations, and it really might be a very good showing for the Democratic Party, despite this year supposedly supposed to be a red wave year. So the data here questions very simple, very simple ones that you've seen from other pollsters, the right direction, wrong direction. We're not going to focus too much on that. The one that really seems to grab my attention is this question on the issue of state problems. Which are the issues that concern you, or the problem that concerns you the most within the state? And the number one issue, 19% of voters, 1 in 5 voters, are going into November not worried mostly about inflation or healthcare or crime or gun control, but about addressing abortion laws in Michigan after the Roe v. Wade decision. This wasn't even on the question before the Roe v. Wade decision. The second issue, improving the quality of education. The third issue, upgrading infrastructure, roads, bridges, dams, drinking water, and wastewater treatment systems. The fourth issue, reducing state and local government spending. What might you find here that doesn't really seem to be super substantial? Well, things that don't have to do with abortion, things that don't have to do with education or infrastructure. Quite frankly, 3 issues where maybe the Democrats aren't doing so well in education, but on the issue of infrastructure, absolutely. On the issue of abortion, 1000%. And the fact that you don't really see many people talking about the economy as a first choice, even though it wasn't necessarily an option, talking about state and local government spending is really where that goes into, because when you see the Republicans pushing the platform points about student loan cancellation or infrastructure bill spending, etc., that's what is many Republicans at least contribute to the cause of inflation across this nation. But it's in the 4th place position. The fact that it's not number 1 by a long shot tells you that it's not, quite frankly, just it's the economy, stupid. It's much more than that. It's the issue of abortion that has now completely engulfed the state of Michigan into what is likely to be a very similar result to what we have seen within the state of Kansas. But let's get to that as we go through. And what you will find here is that this poll is not lopsided in favor of the Democratic Party, at least when it comes down to how favorabilities are tallied and what we have seen in the data sets so far. Joe Biden has an unfavorability rating of 53% amongst this group and a favorability rating of just 38%. Gretchen Whitmer, on the other hand, it's 48% in favor and 43% not so much. That's much better than where Joe Biden is. Donald Trump, surprisingly, though, outperforming President Biden. But honestly, when you're an out-of-party president, you tend to see a bump in your approval. It also means that Donald Trump might be more electable in 2024 than he was in 2020 in the state of Michigan. Just something to think about. And as we go through, questioning President Biden's job as president, you find that the total negative here was 69%. But I will caution it by saying that just fair is about 20% of the vote here, and that is considered to be negative. I wouldn't say I declared just fair as negative. I'd say it's somewhere in the limbo. I really wouldn't give people an option to have just fair. Nobody is that unopinionated on President Biden, at least to a wide extent. So 20% I really don't think should be added into the total negative, but that's just my personal opinion. But it's a lot better because just fair is thrown into the opinion for Gretchen Whitmer. And even though, you are seeing some lopsided numbers here, the honest result is that Gretchen Whitmer is positively approved of. And even if it is negative, it's by 4 points when Biden is down, 29 points? A very significant drop-off, and one that can explain why Gretchen Whitmer is so electable. So looking at the question here, if the November election was held today, who would you vote for? 50% say Gretchen Whitmer. She's already at that cutoff, doesn't need any more votes. Tudor Dixon is at 39%. Now, again, I don't think an 11-point margin of victory is realistic. When you take a look at the 538 forecast, it tells you that, while there might be potentially an 11-point margin of victory, it has narrowed down over the past couple of times. You're going from 12 points down to 11, nearing 10 points at this point. I will also say, actually, this is 9 points. What I will say is that I do not think that an 11-point margin of victory just simply is possible right now in the state of Michigan for either political party. It especially helps the GOP that 2022 is not a year like 2020 or 2018. Republicans are likely still going to win control of the House of Representatives. The Senate is a different question. But in many of these races, they have the benefit of having an unpopular incumbent as president of the United States and them being a Democrat. Quite frankly, the GOP is in a very good position and should be dominating the Senate, House, and governorships. And the fact that they're not is why this is so substantial and why we need to really be understanding why this might be. Michigan was already on track to go in favor of Gretchen Whitmer before the Roe v. Wade decision, but now the stakes are significantly higher. Tudor Dixon has vehemently said that she is vehemently pro-life with no exceptions for the issue of rape, incest, and in some cases, a mother's life at risk. She has backtracked on that third point, so I will say that, recognize that some people can technically change their stances or opinions on certain issues, but what I see from the state of Michigan is that they have an extremist pro-life candidate on one side of the issue, taking the unpopular side of the issue on the Right to Reproductive Freedom Initiative, and that's only going to damage their chances at winning the governorship, and it already has. Whitmer would not be leading this much without the Roe v. Wade decision being overturned in the Dobbs v. Jackson decision. Michigan's governor race would be moving in a different direction by historical standard, national standard, whatever you might want to call it. This is a Biden +3 state, yet the Democrat is winning by 7 in a year, polling-wise, 7 points to the right of the nation. What does that tell me? It tells me the GOP has significantly dropped the ball, and Democrats are surprisingly lucking out. Now, this isn't to say that there haven't been exceptions in the past to red wave years. For instance, we go back about 8 years to 2014. What you will find is that despite it being an overwhelmingly good year for the GOP, Democrats still won in some states that you might not necessarily expect them to, or rather, Republicans lost. For instance, in the state of Alaska, Sean Parnell, Alaska candidate for governor, lost as a Republican in a red wave year in the state of Alaska that was very solid for the GOP. You look back at 2010, Alaska went to the GOP to this candidate by 21 points. 4 years later, it goes to an independent. Then you head over to the state of Colorado. John Hickenlooper wins this race. This is a very good year for the GOP. So what happens? Well, the Democrats still end up winning, largely in part because Republicans dropped the ball. You take a look at the state of Minnesota. Republicans should have won there. In 2010, it was an exceptionally close race. It was an automatic pickup target. What happens? They don't pick it up. Pennsylvania, probably one of the most shocking ones of them all. Tom Wolf wins by 10 points statewide in a state that actually voted for Obama by less 2 years prior against Mitt Romney. So to see this state actually shift to the left relative to the last election is a testament to how the GOP really failed in this race, how as an incumbent Republican governor really collapsed within this governor's race, and how the Democrats came out ahead despite it being an overwhelming red wave year. Now, I am no longer confident that this will be an overwhelming red wave year, but we could have seen something similar like that happen in the state of Michigan. But the driving factor isn't an unpopular Republican. The driving factor isn't the Republican Party. Yes, they are dropping the ball, but that's not the driving factor for why Gretchen Whitmer could even be at this 11-point, really irreconcilable lead that you never would have seen in any other type of circumstance. She didn't even win by 11 points in the 2018 election, which is why partially I don't believe the number to this extent. I think she's up by the average of about 7 points statewide. But again, it all comes down to the issue of abortion. We have seen what happens when voters were given a question about Democrats and Republicans on a ballot before the Dobbs decision. You saw Texas's 34th congressional district flip in favor of the Republican Party, a Democrat double-digit district from the last congressional election, a Biden +4 district, and what happened? It flipped to the GOP by a margin of about 4 points with the combined vote share, but in terms of candidate versus the top two, about 7 points. Point being, the GOP flipped a House seat before the midterm elections, and they did so by swinging a district by epic proportions. But in every special election since the Dobbs decision, Nebraska's 1st district, Minnesota's 1st district, New York's 19th district, 23rd district, whatever it might be, every single one, and I say that honestly and truly, every single district has shifted in favor of the Democrats. We are right to assume that could happen again, especially in states where abortion is on the ballot. Making it the number one issue for voters is exactly what the Democratic Party needs to do in order to win elections. And looking at the results based off this question here, would you vote for the abortion referendum? Would you not? First thing that I would say that is quite interesting is that looking at the results, well, guess what? Only 58% of voters say they're pro-choice. But in terms of the question about whether or not they're voting to support women's rights to allow abortion within the state, some people might be personally pro-life, but would not vote that way. Because 67% of respondents say they are voting yes for the constitutional amendment to protect abortion, despite only 58% of voters being pro-choice. So that's very similar to, I honestly think, what we've seen in the state of Kansas, where restricting a woman's access has never been the popular position. Even though there are some voters who are personally pro-life, and I've seen this to be the case with many, many Republicans and even some Democrats here who say that I'm personally pro-life. If I was a woman, or as a woman, I would never get an abortion. Those are things that people say, but they would still believe that their personal beliefs should not infringe on the right for another woman to have an abortion. And I get that gets convoluted and interesting, but there is a very clear distinction here, and there's a reason why that pro-life vote does not translate to 33% no vote. Just something to think about, just something to understand, because yes, it might be a little confusing, because technically speaking, being pro-choice means you allow a woman's right to choose, but when it comes down to personal issues, you have people who say, I'm personally pro-life, but I will allow a woman to have the right to choose because that's not my choice. They won't personally say they're pro-choice, which is why I think you see some difference here in the responses, but the final results here show that based off these numbers, 67% total vote yes. And based off of Kansas's results, honestly, that's not too far out of the question by any metric. This is a Trump plus 15 state. This is a Biden plus 3 state. To see it more lopsided in favor of the yes vote definitely makes a lot more sense, and definitely makes just a lot of sense altogether as to why the Democratic Party is maintaining and keeping this very substantial lead. Oh, it thinks I'm a bot. Very substantial lead across the state of Michigan, and why they will more than likely win the general election, as everybody has been indicating, and we're practically 2 months away. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos, governor election analysis videos at that. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.